with Smoke Wallin. What a badass name you have there. You are a experienced CEO, you're a business builder, you're an advisor, you're a company director, you're a jack of all trades, as they say. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's very nice to be here, and hopefully I'll live up to that intro.
So you have actually 25 years of experience in the products and beverage and distribution industries. Tell us a little bit about that and how you transitioned over into cannabis.
Sure. So, first of all, I when I got out of college, I went to Seagram and then jumped over to the liquor distribution side of things and spent a number of years building up a large wine and spirits and beer distributor. And, so learned a lot about brands and launching other people's brands and building out, distribution across the Midwest, and got to be chairman and president of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers, the trade association. So very active in, it's a parallel industry in that the alcohol industry is obviously regulated at the state and federal level. And, it had a prohibition, and prohibition got repealed, and each state created their own set of laws. So a lot of those things are now kind of happening in the cannabis hemp world. And so I feel like that's a really good background. When I first got into this space, people were like, oh yeah, there's so many rules, and there's the state, and then there's federal, and all this stuff, and it keeps changing. I'm like, yeah, that's my world. Like, to me, that's just business. So that part of my background kind of, was a natural. And then I went on and did a lot of my own brands, launched a bunch of my own ideas, and also helped a lot of other people launch their brands. So I spent a lot of time in bars, not just drinking, but looking at this bar and saying, like, what's missing? Like, what's the white space between all the other brands that existed? And what would make sense that I could get into distribution, onto the shelf, that would make sense to consumers? So, a lot of that kind of thought process. Now, fast forward to this space, and, frankly, there's no big brand yet. And there's pockets of brands, and there's some that are starting to emerge, but they're still pretty small in the scheme of things. So it's like a kid in a candy store. Like, there's so many opportunities, so many great ideas, and I love all the experimentation that we're doing, that the industry's doing. I think there's a bright future.
So right now, tell us about Vertical Wellness. You're a multinational vertically integrated CBD brand. That sounds fancy, but what does that really mean?
Well, it depends on when you talk to me. So right now we're launching a whole bunch of brands, and we have some nice momentum. But this time last year we were trying to go public. We were close to a transaction to do that. We had grown 1,800 acres of hemp. In mostly Kentucky, but also Tennessee. And we had harvested 4 million pounds of hemp. And just as the prices and market was kind of collapsing for hemp, and lots of people were running into trouble. So, the last, I would say from October through March of last year, it was like, how do we survive? So there's a whole survival, pivot, change our model, get skinny again. I had to lay off a bunch of people, which I hate doing, but I had to. And how do we figure out how to survive? And then COVID hit, and of course, all the while, the industry itself was in some distress, and especially the processors. They had raised the seven of the largest processing hemp processors raised over $400 million, went bankrupt. And so I'm like, okay, this is going to be a little bit difficult. So we actually ended up pivoting our model a bit and offering services to try to help the investors or the creditors get their investment out of those deals. And that turned into large scale contracts to process hemp for other people. So besides my 4 million pounds, we have contracts to this year process about 18 million additional pounds of hemp for others. So we became a kind of a large processor, drying hemp and then doing some extraction. And that really bought us time during COVID, because a lot of the retailers weren't taking new brands, weren't really open to, everyone kind of pressed pause on with the FDA headwinds that we all have faced with the ingestibles being an issue, and just everyone's just trying to survive in a weird environment. the brands that we had planned to launch were all put on hold. So we waited a little bit. We got this services business working, started generating cash flow, and now we're we're launching our brands now. So what does that mean? So we are a vertically integrated company. So we're touching the hemp plants, we're extracting, we're making CBD, and then we really are a brand company. But in order to be a brand company, I think you have to make sure you have a good supply of product, and in order to scale brands. So we invested in the infrastructure first. Now we're launching our brands, and the most important thing is getting distribution, which we're working on as we speak.
You're working with a lot of different products and you're able to see trends. And, you know, in Q2, things are really turning up for you guys. So can you speak a little bit on some of the consumer trends that you've noticed during this pandemic, and what predictions might you have for next year?
So there's a underlying big trend that was going on way before the pandemic, and I think will continue way after, maybe accelerated by, but just a general desire for more healthfulness and less pharma solutions, more natural solutions. And, you know, I see it in lots of different areas. You know, certainly if you go to any Whole Foods or, you know, that kind of, you know, store, you see all the organic food, you see all the different options in terms of supplements. And, you know, it's a booming industry. And the quote, better for you business of just lots of things that, you know, there's this and then there's this that's better for you. Even in alcohol, where, you know, I spent a lot of my years in career, you know, there's this whole low alcohol, the seltzer thing, you know, like there's a little bit better for you, less calories, less sugar. That thing is booming, right? It's like a huge segment of the business that came out of nowhere in the last 5 years. So all these trends are kind of converging. And I believe cannabis and the cannabinoids, you know, we talk a lot about CBD and THC, but, you know, it's CBD and probably another 148 cannabinoids that are in the plant that all have different, you know, different qualities and can combine in the right way, can really provide lots of solutions for people. I think we're at the right moment, the right time with where the public is. We're looking at other ways of solving their problem. And I'll use me as an example because I can, and I was a wrestler at Cornell and broke both ankles a couple times. And, you know, I took Advil for a long time, like almost every day I was taking Advil to deal with inflammation and the pain. And I've really quit 95% of that using CBD. And it's like, it's a game changer for me. And you know, who knows what long-term use of something like Advil is, but it's like, it's definitely not something you want, right? So I think that we in the industry broadly are in a really great moment in time where the market wants this, consumers want this. The big challenge that we all face is how do we, A, educate them, and then B, give trust. If you're a brand side, how do you give people confidence and trust that what they're buying is what they think it is, and will actually help them with whatever they're trying to solve. And I think that's where the industry needs to really work together to do it right. You know, we've had lots of people, you know, just jumping in that maybe don't have the same level of integrity that others of us that do. You know, and you've got to have, you know, it's got to be what you say it is. It's got to have, if you say it has, you know, 1,000 milligrams of CBD, it needs to have 1,000 milligrams of CBD. And when tested, it needs to be proven that that's where it is. And so I think as we mature as an industry, just truth in labeling, making sure that all the testing's in place, that, you know, what you say is what you have. Those are all really important factors with gaining consumer confidence. And it's in everyone's interest as an industry to educate the consumer and to have them trust what's out there.
Absolutely. Certificate of analysis are crucial. I always encourage people not to buy items if they don't come with test results, because there's too many counterfeit items. There's too much snake oil out there. And you brought up a really interesting point about making health claims. Let's talk about the opioid epidemic for a moment. Cannabis has always been seen as a gateway drug, and now it's being seen as an exit drug. Purdue Pharma, actually, it came out that they accepted guilt and will be paying an $8 billion fine. I mean, how can CBD, or I mean, what are your thoughts really in using CBD or THC as an exit? And, what does the future maybe look like for people that are trying to come off these pills?
I like to say the reason it's a gateway, the reason that it actually was a gateway is because you made people deal with a drug dealer. If it's illegal and you force consumers to go buy products from someone who is selling it illegally, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, they also have other things they want to sell you. And they're trying to upgrade what they're selling to the next bigger thing that they can make more money on. And that's not cannabis, it's other things, right? So the gateway is because it's illegal, you cause people who would normally buy, if it weren't, would buy from a normal store or buy from a dispensary. You make them deal with the crime world, and the crime world has other intentions than your health. So I think it's like they have it flipped, right? And I know, personally, I have a lot of friends who are veterans and served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and there's a very large community of veterans who, they come off the service, they have PTSD and lots of other ailments. The VA prescribes them what I would call a poison cocktail of anti-anxiety, pain, opioids, all kinds, sleep pills. And you combine these things. I don't think anyone knows what they all do together, except they create, I think we have as many as 22 suicides a day of military folks. And I'm not saying it's all because of this, but it's certainly a factor. And I know a bunch of veterans who have personally gotten off of all those opioids by using cannabis, by using natural solutions, and it saved a lot of lives. So I'm a huge believer in it. I think it's, you bring up a great point, and we have an epidemic around the country. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it that much. It's amazing to me. It should be both, I don't care what political side anyone's on, like it's an issue that everybody should be concerned with in this country. And the idea that it's so available, yeah, I'm glad those guys are paying a big fine, but it's still so easy to get doctors to prescribe. And then, if you can't get a prescription or you get hooked on it, then you're off in the street and, you're accessing, the black market. And cannabis is definitely part of the solution. I think it's a, non-addictive, if you have acute pain, if you cut your leg or you get, you have some bad injury, opioids are a really amazing thing that can help you get through that. But they're not designed for long-term use. And that's where we've got it all wrong. Like people use it, and if you use it over time, they don't work as well. You have to keep upping it, and it's addictive. Cannabis is not addictive. You can use it over long periods of time, and there's been lots of studies shown that you can, people can stop if they want to, and it's not addictive at that level. And it basically, for chronic pain, it's actually a great solution because it's not addictive and it's not causing all these other externalities. I'm not one who's going to make excessive claims about it's a miracle and it solves all problems, but gosh, it's got a lot of good qualities, and crazy for us not to be studying it and taking advantage of this thing that's a natural product that's been around for thousands of years in use until this little blip of history where some crazy guys got together and made it illegal.
Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with? Maybe, where they can find you if they want to work with Vertical Wellness, or, where people can find your products?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of brands just launching now. We have an online shop called VWEL shop.com, which is our CBD store. So we're starting to sell those products. We're launching in distribution at retail, state by state. So that'll start popping up in markets toward the end of the year, and we'll have more to go there. Yeah, I mean, look, we love partnerships. We have a partnership with Kathy Ireland, who, of supermodel fame, but she's got an incredible business, and she has a licensing business that does over $2 billion of sales of products. And talk about how do we educate consumers and how do we build trust with this category. Well, Kathy's got a trusted name to a lot of shoppers. And now we're bringing health and wellness, products with CBD under her banner to market. And we think that that's a great way to kind of bridge the gap between people that they trust Kathy, they want to try CBD, but they don't know what to try. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing to try to educate people and move the ball forward. But and the other thing I'll just say in terms of the future, I do think the ingestible thing is a big deal. The FDA up to now has been, has been a roadblock to fully taking advantage of ingestibles. When I say that, edibles and beverages and all the different form factors that we know are very popular. I mean, the two best-selling forms of CBD are tinctures and gummies, and they're both not legal according to FDA, but they're being sold all over the place, right? So that needs to change. And back to politics, I know, and this is true of cannabis and CBD in general, the big obstacle that we all face, it's not the public, it's the pharma industry that sees billion-dollar franchises of their drugs being threatened by these natural solutions. You know, if you make a multi-billion-dollar sleep drug or anti-anxiety drug or, or pain relief, you don't want to see this natural solution become widely available. And that's why most of the legalizations on the cannabis side have been referendums, like the one coming up in Jersey, right? Mm-hmm. So these referendums, generally speaking, are passing because consumers, the public, want this. But when they go to the legislature, like it did in New York last year, like it did in New Jersey last year, it's getting stopped because behind the scenes, the pharma guys are stopping it.
Right. And, edibles have increased by almost 33% during this pandemic. So ingestibles are very popular. They're a preferred way of consumption for many individuals that can't smoke. My mother had lung cancer, she prefers alternative forms than smoking. What are your thoughts quickly on, Constellation Brands? They're in the beverage industry. They just had closed down several cultivation sites. Maybe they see a benefit in ingestibles down the road. Is there something that we don't know yet that maybe the future is edible?
Yeah, for sure. Well, no, we know this. So Constellation, is in effect controls Canopy, right? Mm-hmm. And Canopy just recently announced a partnership, and they're launching a brand of gummies and tinctures with Martha Stewart. Yes. So Martha Stewart was on CBS 2 weeks ago, making jam look delicious, and then she pivoted and said, and that's where I got my inspiration for my gummies. And she held up her gummies. And so, and meanwhile, the FDA still says that's not permitted yet, but they're doing it. So look, it's happening. And I think it's just inevitable. We're gonna get this, get that roadblock out of the way. But right now it's hurting a lot of smaller brands, a lot of smaller companies, because retailers are afraid to carry it, other than the corner store. But the mainstream retailers, the Targets and Walmarts of the world, they're gonna be very careful and cautious until we can clear the regulatory path. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to do that. I've been to Washington, I've had lobbyists, I'm writing opinion pieces around the country, trying to get the attention of the decision makers. Has been very difficult in this environment, but I think that will change after the election.
Well, thank you for fighting the good fight. We appreciate that. So.